We are here for justice. We are here to protect the innocent. We are exposing the predators. Welcome.
Here is a compilation of various different interviews with child sex offenders. Warning: the following video contains content that may be disturbing for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Inmates have a strict hierarchy for sex offenders, with rapists at the top, and the men who have molested small children at the bottom. They're known as chomos in jailhouse slang. Even in Fremont, there's nothing lower.
When a sex offender comes in and they are a child molester, it is going to be a lot more difficult. So they're going to be the first ones that your other inmates try to come out and victimize. The instant they step into the cell house, the other inmates are looking at them, sizing them up, trying to determine what they're in here for, if they're going to be an easy mark, an easy victim, and see what they can get from that inmate.
Yet one inmate on Fustini's cell block is unusually open about committing a sex crime.
Inmate Mendoza pretty much stays to himself. Even though he might not be the most muscular or the youngest or the biggest guy around, they know him. He's established himself. So if he stays to himself, stays out of the mix, and he doesn't cause trouble for other inmates, they'll pretty much leave him alone. I guess based on his therapy and just the way he handles himself and just the person that he is, he does seem to be pretty confident about himself.
Inmate Randall Mendoza was convicted of sexual assault and received a 16-year sentence. The victim of Mendoza's sex crime was a 12-year-old girl. She was the daughter of the woman he lived with, who was seriously ill at the time.
And over the next 2.5 years or so, it really got bad. And during that time, my stepdaughter, her daughter, I kind of allowed her to become my partner as far as helping around the house, because I was working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and doing the cleaning and cooking. And during that time, I ended up sexually assaulting her. I knew it was wrong, but it's like I didn't want to do anything, but what made me dangerous at the time is I still did what I didn't want to do. I knew it was wrong and I couldn't stop myself. I was just so full of anger and stress and pushed to the end, and I wasn't thinking. It was total. I'm responsible for what I did because I allowed myself to get in that position.
Mendoza only has 1 year left on his sentence, but he knows his crime will hang over him for the rest of his life.
Sex offenders are singled out because they picked on the most innocent people there is. Their crime is the most heinous. My crime is heinous. Even though I wasn't a 2-year-old, but people look at that. They look at the age of the victim. They look what actually happened, what type of contact there was. If you enjoyed it, or if you brag about it, how you walk about it. But for the most part, sex offenders, they just get off on victimizing people that can't fight back.
Mendoza says he's speaking out so people won't stereotype all sex offenders, but it puts him at risk.
People in here really care about, they might be convicts or inmates or offenders, but they all have children. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous about what I'm taking the time of telling you about, but I feel there's a reason for it, for me to educate people.
But telling the truth sometimes comes at a price, and Randall Mendoza may have to pay.
Why do I think I'm a pedophile? Well, I don't think it's really a choice, because I think you are born like that. But on the other hand, I think a lot of people have those feelings and they don't accept them, they suppress them. Firstly, I don't see myself as 100% pedophile. I also like people who are above 18 years old. And I think that sexuality of every human is a mix. Well, I'm a non-offending offending pedophile, and the difference between offending and non-offending is obvious. People who are offending, they are breaking the law. Well, about child pornography, you have virtual child pornography, manga, and so on. And sometimes I think that's attractive. And it's not illegal drawings, but real child pornography is illegal, and I'm not watching that.
We're digging deeper tonight into the fight to keep kids safe from convicted child molesters. Earlier, NBC 10's Audrey Washington introduced us to a group of local law enforcement personnel as they went door to door on Halloween night checking on child predators. But how do these convicted of the crime feel about special Halloween checks? In this exclusive interview, Audrey spoke with a man convicted of molesting a 13-year-old girl to find out.
That's half the battle. These guys, we had to be one step ahead of them.
Our night-long tag-along with Providence police and probation officers began here at a group home for convicted child molesters. This is where we spoke with Patrick, a clean-cut young man who must register as a sex offender until 2048.
I met a 13-year-old girl over the internet. I molested her over a period of about 6 months.
Patrick asked us to conceal his identity, but was rather candid when explaining why he was in favor of the special Halloween safety checks and recommendations. Child molesters were urged to keep their doors closed, lights off, and not hand out any candy.
I think it's a smart idea. It kind of keeps people in check, make everybody feel more comfortable.
If a child came to your door, how would that affect you, do you think?
Right now? Yeah. I wouldn't even answer the door.
Patrick is in therapy specially designed to help him recognize and avoid his triggers.
Been taking treatment for 5 years now. Just keep checking what's going on in my life and how I react to different situations.
Those whose job it is to protect children from people like Patrick favor the therapy. Anything that will keep predators away from kids and from reoffending. Really, these kids essentially only steps away, right?
Oh, yeah, right across the street there's little kids. So if they, we want everybody to know what's going on. It's all for the little kids.
One of the things for me to admit is I did it once, I can do it again. That's what everybody is. So, and for some guys, just seeing a kid is enough to set them off.
A fact law enforcement is well aware of as they continue their checks and their fight to keep kids safe.
I'm not relapsing, I'm not back in a cycle, because I know someone's coming to check on me.
In Providence, Audrey Washington, NBC 10 News.
This young minister has been accused of child sexual abuse. He's an outstanding member of the community, widely respected and well liked. He has no criminal record of any sort. Is he guilty? You decide.
I was a youth minister, an assistant minister. It was a rather small congregation for our community, around 200 to 300 people, at best 300. And I feel the needs of an assistant pastor, an associate minister, a deacon, and the highest being elder pastor, and working with the youth of the congregation. He was a kid at church, underprivileged. He came in with a group of other children, and I reached out and tried to help him as no one else would. And just like the kids that normally are underprivileged, they try to take advantage of people who help them. Obviously, he has a lot of disturbances, mental problems. I think if you'll look in his records, he was even in a mental institution for 3 years before coming to church. Before being in the boys' home, he has a criminal record anyway. Yes, I think ministers are victimized by false reports. They have a very sensitive job. They are out there working with people constantly. They're alone, many times unsupervised. The only person with them, of course, would be the minister and the child, or the minister and the accusing victim, if you will. So who's to say that the minister didn't do it? Most 80% of the time, I would say, the victim is believed more than the minister. And it's because of all the heightened hoopla over victims and all that stuff. It's ridiculous. Ministers too much are victimized themselves for their kind deeds. People want to get money out of them if they're a little bit successful. Then their entire reputation is shot. They go back into the ministry, and they may say they trust them, and they're never totally trusted again. Their entire education, work, whatever they've gone through for years has gone down the drain, never to be fully restored, never to be fully recapacitated as what was before. It's a shame, and it's extremely discouraging. I have spent 2 years in seminary. I am the youngest deacon of the Methodist Church in the state, and it's absolutely all of that prior effort and work, my entire life dream, the hopes of my parents, is now being questioned. I only hope God deals mercifully with them.
What's the truth? Was he falsely accused, as he claims?
I had 53 hands-on definite victims, and there are 42 other ones that can be questioned as far as age and so forth is concerned. I have 53 minor victims.
There's been a tremendous increase in child sexual abuse reports in the last decade. Some of the accused have been highly respected members of the community. Many people wonder whether such respectable citizens could be child abusers. This film will explore this whole issue. Can you tell if someone is a child molester by their standing in the community, how well you know them, or how aggressively they deny it?
In fact, did you molest Mikey?
Yes, I did. I molested Mikey on numerous occasions throughout a 3-year period, from the time beginning at 9 until he was 12 years old. I knew Michael before he began coming to the congregation where I attended. I worked many times with the people in his area with problem children. As an older teenager, I would go out and assist people in the boys' homes and so forth for little small things like baseball games, softball games, etc. And as a matter of fact, I chose him because he was as a victim, because he was a problem child, because people neglected him and oftentimes pushed him aside, and I knew it would be easy for me to get close to him, to be his friend, if you will. And then again, I also knew if he told, that there would be little or small amounts of belief in him. No one would believe him basically if he told. And in fact, they didn't. When he did tell, and when it became a bigger issue, when I was investigated, the head of the department of my county told me, he said, "You have nothing to worry about." He said, "We can tell from the very beginning that this is all a big scheme," and it was dropped almost as quickly as it came about. I was caught twice before I was incarcerated. Really, it wasn't being caught, it was I was told on twice before being incarcerated. They were not believed the first 2 times. I had many people, counselors, church leaders of the community, to come up and stand in my defense several times in those occasions, and it was simply just totally disbelieved. Even the second time, it was more stood out against than the first time, because they thought, well, here he goes again, this young man trying to help unfortunate children, and they're turning against him. And I was even told as much to say, I had a minister come to me and tell me, he said, Patrick, what's going on is you'll run across it many times. People you try to help will stab you in the back. He said, roll with the punches, stick with it, you're doing a good job. He said, and in the end you'll be blessed for it.
What about this next man? Is he in denial, or is he an innocent man accused of adult rape? To back up his claim of innocence, Roger took and passed a polygraph.
No, I didn't do this. I did a job at this lady's house a couple of months ago, and during the process of working, she came out and served us drinks. She was friendly. She was wearing really short shorts, and well, I thought she looked nice. She smiled a lot, and I thought she even winked at me once. And we talked some. And there was a motorcycle at the house for sale, and I went to look at it, and this is like a couple of months after the job, and she remembered me. She was alone, except for her baby, and he was in bed. And we talked a little. We talked about the motorcycle. I came on to her, but she didn't say no. I kissed her, we made out a little bit, and one thing led to another, and we were in the bedroom, we had sex. Her next door neighbor came in the house, and I guess he wanted to know who was there, and saw my car out front. I understand that they're friends, but she panicked at that point. When he came in, I guess she thought he would tell her husband, and she screamed rape. I didn't know what else to do but run. I was scared.
Roger eventually confessed that what really happened was very different from what you just heard. Here is what actually transpired.
The victim was 23 years old. She was a housewife. I gained access to the home knowing that there was a motorcycle there for sale. So I went there during the daytime knowing she would be home. The husband would be at work. I had done a job there 2 months prior. And knowing that, I knew a lot about them, doing the job for them. I knocked on the front door, and she answered the door, and I said I came to see about the motorcycle for sale. I looked for signs of recognition. She didn't seem to recognize me. I had had a beard before and I was shaved, and she told me to step around back on the patio that was around there, and I walked around there, and she met me out there, and the back door was open. And she turned around, turned her back to me to take the cover off the motorcycle. And that's when I grabbed her. Well, I grabbed her from behind, and in my haste, I dropped the knife that I had in my hand. I was going to use that as a scare tactic because it didn't fit my MO. I had convinced myself that as long as I don't harm this person, there's no real harm done. And so she backed against me, kicked back against me, and I fell. But I wouldn't let her go. I held on to her and I threw her down with me, and we fell through the back door into the living room. And that's when I got on top of her. I wrestled her down, put my hand over her mouth and told her not to scream, that I was going to let her up, but if she did scream, I'd kill her. I used fear as a weapon. I knew already that as long as she was afraid that I would kill her, even though I wouldn't, she would do what I told her to, and she did. And I then forced her into her bedroom. I raped her in the vagina 3 times, 3 different times. I raped her in the mouth with my penis once. I raped her in the anus with my finger once. And afterward, I asked her if she had a knife, and she said yes, and she was real scared at that point. I could see that she thought I was probably going to kill her. She had a child in the house, 18-month-old boy. I made her put him to bed prior to all of this in his bedroom, and he slept. I forced her in the kitchen, made her get out the butcher knife, and she handed it to me, and I said, no, it's not for me, that's for you. I want you to stab me with that knife. And I grabbed the blade and put the point of it right in my solar plexus, beneath my sternum. I said, I want you to push it real hard, and when I close my eyes. And so she started crying, and she said that she couldn't do that, she couldn't kill me. It wasn't in her to kill someone. And then I got angry because I had planned on suicide that day. And I was angry because she wouldn't do it, and I didn't have the courage to do it myself. And so I screamed at her and I told her, well, you'd better do it, because if you don't, I'm going to use it on you. And I thought I could scare her into doing it. She still wouldn't do it. Her baby started crying. She left, went and got him, came back in the room, and then I broke down and cried. I was crying for myself. I was feeling sorry for me. I wasn't even thinking about her.
I would do kind and generous things for people. I would give families money that did not have any money, that was not from the church treasury. It was from my own personal bank accounts. I would support them in all the ways that I could, talk to them, encourage them. I would go to nursing homes, talk with the elderly, pray with the elderly. I would do community service projects, pick up litter off the side of the road. I would mow the lawns for elderly and handicapped people, go grocery shopping for them. I would do activities that were centered around the things that young people like to do, not the things that tend to happen in churches, which are boring and dull. It was actually very exciting for them, and they enjoyed it, and our youth group grew. It was definitely to cover up what I had been doing. It seemed the more I would get into my deviancy, the more I would try to do that was good in the eyes of everyone else. And indeed, in the eyes of everyone else, I was a good kid. I grew up making good grades in school, went to a nice college. All of that just added to the double life.
The double life. Like so many sex offenders, Patrick worked hard at making people think he was not the kind of person who would commit a sexual offense. The church was not an accidental choice of a place to hide. Patrick felt that people in the church were very generous in their opinions of others, and he used that to his advantage.
I consider people that go to church gullible because they have a trust that comes from being Christians and other people. They tend to be better folks all around, and they seem to want to believe in the good that exists in all people. I consider people wanting to believe that these kind of things don't happen, that children shouldn't be molested, and that it doesn't happen. And it really doesn't happen in my community and in my church. And because of that, it was easy for me to convince them, all the more with my good deeds that I had done, with the actions that I had presented the members of the congregation. I think that that they want to believe in people, and because of that, you can easily convince with or without convincing words. They said, well, we know this young man. He has been in our community all of his life. We know his parents, his grandparents, his aunts, his uncles. This is not something that he would do. This is not something that goes along with the behavior that we see him in and day out. And that was true, because I was very careful that they did not see that behavior day in and day out. Most of my deviant behavior happened at nighttime and behind the scenes, away and far from any important people who could make those kinds of judgments that, yes, indeed, Patrick is the kind of person who would go around molesting children.
Roger, too, felt that he had led a double life.
I think people are very easy to fool. The government's been doing it forever.
Why do you think they're so easy to fool?
Because people want to believe in something. And they want to hope, and they want to believe. There's something inside of people that makes them want to believe the best in things and the best in others, because the alternative is not very nice.
If I wanted to fool people, what advice would you give me? What's the best way to do it? How do I act? What do I do?
To be polite. to be kind, to show kindness, especially in public and where there are more than one present. To put this facade on constantly, you wear it like clothes every day. And you smile even when you don't want to smile, and you don't feel like smiling. When you're hurting inside, you push that down, and you smile anyway, and you're polite, and you're kind, and you say the right things. You say the things that you think people want to hear, that you would like to hear. You exercise that sympathy.
The men in this film are all incarcerated sex offenders. In interviewing men for this project, over and over, I heard the same stories. They each had numerous victims. They were often caught many times before the offense for which they were finally incarcerated, and their victims had not been believed. Most ended up in prison only because some corroborating evidence was found, such as pornographic pictures of a child, or because they eventually confessed. Routinely, these sex offenders talked about how they set up and lived a double life, a life that covered up their deviant activities. When caught, they often denied aggressively, and often they found it surprisingly easy to fool people. Wayne has been incarcerated twice for child molestation. The first incarceration was for raping an 8-year-old girl. He tore her vagina so severely, she had to be taken to the hospital.
How many victims do I have total? I believe it's 12.
Okay.
And I would have to really sit down and think about that. Most of my victims are girlfriends, children.
Okay. Why did nothing come of it when the children told?
Well, like one of my victims, she was rather wild, and it's to have a victim like that, it's very easy to make liars out of them because they don't want to tell what they've been doing to start with. You know, it's kind of like if you tell on me, I'll tell on you.
Did you find people easy or hard to fool?
It depends on whether they care or not. You know, if people in general, they're going to think what they want to think, and that's basically all there is to it. I mean, if they want to think bad of you, they're going to think bad of you. If they hear something bad of you and they kind of believe it, they're going to believe it, and if they don't, they don't. And something like that, it's hard to believe. In the business I was in, you know, this guy works around children all the time. If he was molesting children, you know, there's no way he couldn't get caught.
What was your business?
I was night manager of a grocery store. I was in the public a lot. I led a double life. I mean, the store was, I was an entirely different person. Maybe not so much an attitude or the way I acted, but I could honestly be me. You know, I could be a productive person, and a decent person in the community. It was a place where I could say I'm a decent person. You know, when I went home, I had to face this again. You know, I'm not a decent person. I'm an indecent person. I do immoral things. It was like, you know, and you get at work. For me, if I got at work, you know, I loved to work. I loved to stay at work because I didn't have to go back home and face my real self. When I was first asked the question, when she first asked me the question if I did molest her, then it was like electricity running through my body. You know, it's like being really, I just really got nervous. So basically it was to get over the nervousness, because that's the first telltale sign, you know, is being really nervous and perspiring and such as that. Quiver as my voice as is right now, it wouldn't be, you know, I would have worked through that already. It was basically, you know, if the guy really didn't care, it was kind of like an adult conversation, you know, like, you know, come on, guy, you know I'm not going to do anything like that. You know me, if I was talking to somebody I knew. And I would use my job, you know. Look, I've been around children all my life, you know. If I was going to molest a child, don't you think I'd pick a child outside my home and not have it in my home with me all the time? How do I fool people? It's a hard one. You know, I guess I don't really know how to fool them. Just stare them straight in the eye and just tell them, just answer their questions when they ask you. Basically, it's not to be nervous and to look someone in the eye if you can get to grasp, to look someone in the eye, because that's, that's something that's driven in your head all your life. If somebody looks in your eye, they're telling you the truth. So if you can stare someone in the eye and tell them a lie, they're going to say, well, the guy didn't even blink, he didn't look away, he's pretty straight here. Plus, he's pretty good in the community. He's worked at this store 12, 15 years, or he's worked at his business 12, 15 years, and, basically if you can stay calm and look whoever it is in the eye, and especially if the mother of the victim or the victim there, if the victim is anywhere that you can look at her and make her nervous, or him, whichever one it might be, the more nervous that you make them, the more it makes it seem like they're lying. If they're around, most of the time they're not. So just a simple look to a child is traumatizing, as you believe it or not. It really is, especially if the adult is molesting the child.
If this one had gone to court, do you believe you would have been convicted, or do you believe that a jury would have taken your word over the child's?
In my mind, I probably would think that I would have gotten away with it, because I could sit there, and if she was in the courtroom, which sometimes they do, they do bring them in sometimes, and sometimes they don't. And I know when we went to the hearing, she wouldn't even come in the courtroom. And when she did come in, when she looked at me, I just looked back at her, and I really didn't even give her any kind of insinuation with my look. I just basically looked at her. And she went right back out of the courtroom. And if we had went to the court, if we had went to court and we both had been in the courtroom at the same time, then I could have made her nervous enough to make her lie, or make her stumble to make people think she was lying.
There is no boundaries. Let me rephrase that. There was no boundaries for me. No place was off limits. No time was off limits. And no set of circumstances was off limits. At any time that I saw an opportunity to get what I wanted, which was to rape or molest, I took advantage of that. There were times that I raped in a car with the parents in the front seat, me in the back seat with the children. The child would feel such a bond of trust that the child would decide, okay, I'd like to go to sleep. I'd manipulate the child and lay him across the seat and molest the child with my hand on his penis, by forcing my hand on his penis while the parents were in the front seat. There were other times that I molested and raped while at work, where I simply manipulated the child into coming into my office, and I just very simply locked the door and proceeded to do what I wanted to do, which was to rape the child. My nephew, I raped him for a period of 9 years. Raped and molested him for a period of over 9 years. And very few cases did I rape him in which no one was in the house. I have 11 male rape victims. I have one female rape victim. And I have approximately 1,250 male molest victims.
I am a pedophile. I'm not a monster. I have the traction, but I don't act on it. I am Todd Nickerson. I'm a non-offending pedophile. I have never ever sexually abused a child. I never will. I do not look at child porn. I never will. I obey the laws. I respect the laws. I respect society's position on this. I understand it and agree with it. I am part of one of the most hated groups of society. No question about it. We are the scapegoats du jour. If you look at history, there's always one minority that seems to be the one that everybody kind of persecutes, and I think we're it. I'm campaigning for better treatment of people like me. We're non-offending pedophiles. Not all pedophiles are child molesters, and not all child molesters are pedophiles. Pedophile is, strictly speaking, is just somebody who has the sexual attraction to children. They may act on it, they may not. Pedophiles come from all walks of life. We come from all sorts of economic backgrounds, different occupations, and we look like everybody else. There are a lot of teachers and people that, who do work with kids, but I think most of us just hold regular jobs.
How would you say you manage to control your sexual urges?
A lot of people think that if you're attracted to kids that you have some kind of like unusual degree of urge to go out and attack kids, and it's not like that. Most people, when they see somebody that they're attracted to, do they automatically think, oh, I want to jump on them and have sex with them? So it's the same with us. It's just, we just happen to be attracted to kids.
What age groups are you attracted to?
I would say it probably starts about 3, 4 years old, and then goes up into early 20s, late teens, early 20s, and it kind of peaks at about like 9, 10 years old. I'm a political activist for Virtuous Pedophiles, which is a forum that I belong to. I'm out, talking to the media and things, and basically making the case for VirPed. The forum is devoted to helping pedophiles who do not want to offend. There are approximately a few thousand members. We have people who do feel guilty, deal with shame, and we try to help them get past that because, they didn't choose their sexuality, as long as they're not acting on it and they're devoted to doing the right thing. Our philosophy is there's no reason to feel guilty for that. We can talk about books or movies or music or whatever, Just basically, it's just a hangout spot, kind of an all-purpose forum for non-offending pedophiles. My goals are to educate the public and also to bring people who are struggling with this attraction to our forum so that we can help them, provide a circle of support for them. There's not a lot of people that are out and doing what I do. There's just a handful of us doing it.
What was your reaction when you first decided to show your face on the internet, so to speak?
What was the reaction from the public, or?
Yeah.
Well, I got a pretty public backlash, but by the same token, I actually got a lot of support privately. I got hundreds and hundreds of emails from people who were very supportive. A lot of them were people who were survivors of abuse.
Are you worried about your own personal safety in putting yourself in the public eye?
I used to be worried about my safety, and I do take some precautions. I carry this pocket knife with me just in case I ever get attacked. It's never happened, but I've got it if I need it. It's a spring blade. There might be some crazy out there who decides to attack me. Plus I have this, so, that tends to deter most people. I was born without my right hand. It just didn't grow properly. I have to wear this. Slips right back on. Just like that. There was one event that basically hammered it home for me. I call it my eureka moment. It was the moment I realized I'm interested in these younger girls. I was 13, and a neighbor had come over to visit. He had brought his little daughter with him. She was probably about 7 or 8 years old. I was sitting in the living room drawing, and I just remember looking up and just being blown away by how beautiful I thought she was. Initially, I repressed the feelings, especially in my teen years. Because I was a regular at a church, I had asked God to take it away, and I kind of felt like He had. And as I started aging and realized that the age of the girls I was attracted to were staying the same, that's kind of when I realized, this was going to be a problem. I went out with a girl when I was 20 years old, so she was 26. She was very petite, so she was my type physically, or I thought, at the time. At this time, I still wasn't really that attracted to adults, but I thought, well, maybe I can make this work, We dated for about 3 weeks. I kept putting sex off. Finally, I gave in. We tried it. It just didn't work. I went on a couple of dates after that with a couple of girls, but it never really got past that first date stage, and my heart wasn't in it. For all intents and purposes, I am a virgin. I've never had full-blown sexual intercourse. It just hasn't happened.
You had suffered abuse
Yeah.
as a child. Can you tell us about that?
I came over to visit my grandmother. There was a guy that they didn't really know him that well. He was an acquaintance. And she asked me if I would take him outside to show my grandpa's garden. He went out to the side of the garden and sat down on the ground and patted the ground, indicating he wanted me to sit by him. And so I did, and then he just basically touched me. So it was a one-time event. I wouldn't say that it was the only thing that led to my sexuality. I would say there was probably a lot of other things that led me in that direction. But yeah, I think it was probably a contributing factor. I am a pretty reclusive person by nature. So I don't interact with the public that much anyway. I don't go out of my way to be around children. If they're around me, then they're around me. It happens. You can't completely cut yourself off. My niece, then my friend's daughter did that one. A friend's daughter did that one, and then a friend's daughter did that one.
And they're okay with that?
Yeah.
They're fine?
Yeah, because they know I am no danger to them. I'm probably safer with me than they are with a lot of non-pedophiles. I have a pretty healthy imagination. I think it helps me to process my sexuality in healthy ways that don't involve any real children. A lot of my fantasies actually revolve around kids who are more powerful than I am. This idea of super-powered kids, who are able to consent, because they're just super smart, or they could just crush me, if I hurt them. My family recognizes that I'm doing something important, that I'm kind of a pioneer, that I'm out here doing something that really needs to be done, and raising awareness and letting people know what people like me deal with and what we struggle with. I'm happier every day, and I feel like I have a purpose now. I am neither proud nor ashamed of being a pedophile. At this point, I just accept it. It's who I am.
The man arrested for preying on a pair of Overland Park girls comes clean. Aaron Ussery is behind bars tonight. Might be hard to believe, but this admitted sex offender says he only wants to help protect children from people like him. It's a story you won't see anywhere else.
I don't plan to contest the charges. I know why I'm here. I deserve to be here.
The chilling words from Aaron Ussery, who says he knew what he was doing was wrong, in a situation that started out innocently on an art-sharing website, but quickly spiraled out of control.
I was able to help One of them through her cutting and suicide issues. For a long time, I was making progress. And then over time, it became more about me and less about them, and that's when I lost everything that I stood for.
It wasn't long before Usuri started sending and receiving pictures from 2 Overland Park 12-year-olds, and then video, leading to a laundry list of sickening charges. Sexual exploitation of a minor, luring a minor for sexual exploitation, and the transmission of obscene materials. He says he was in love.
Everyone seems to just take into their own minds that it's not possible. You can't be in love with someone. Well, you can.
Usuri says he never planned to meet the girls face-to-face. He says now he plans to get the help he needs and offers this advice to parents.
Let them know, hey, I know that you're on the internet a lot. I know that this is really exciting for you, but be mindful that there are things out there that you will want to avoid, and here are what some of those things are, and here's why we want you to avoid them.
There was a lot of effort and patience put into what's called grooming, to creating the opportunity to sexually abuse a victim. Is that right?
Yes, there's
going on?
definitely a lot of patience. It's something I took a lot of time doing, thinking of ways to be left alone, thinking of ways to having a child trust me, my victim trust me. And thinking of ways to be alone with them so I could sexually abuse them. And
so how would you do that?
Oh,
How
I
would
would
you
just
create that trust?
Oh, I'd say nice things like, well, you're like my little girl, my little princess or something, and buy them a lot of things that. Just treat them well. Just show them that, well, you know, I bought you this because I think you're my little princess or, you know, my little girl.
So that, when you started that, when you did these things, they were innocent, or would appear innocent to a parent or anybody else that was watching. They were not sexual things you were doing.
Right.
Is that right?
Right. They were not sexual.
At the time, what was going on in your mind? Was it innocent to you too?
No, I guess what I was trying to do was to gain the child's confidence and trust.
And what was your goal?
So,
Besides gaining the trust, for what purpose?
To sexually abuse later on.
How much time would you spend developing that trust?
Oh, God. In one case, it was thought of for 3 or 4 years.
Really?
Just thinking of little ways to make her feel special and trust me.
And all the time you knew that your purpose was to end up sexually abusing?
Eventually, yes.
How would you keep other people from knowing what you were thinking about? How did you keep everyone fooled?
It's quite easy, I guess. I mean, I was trying to be the perfect parent, the perfect friend, the perfect neighbor. Gee, if you want to go somewhere, you know, I'll watch your kids for you, and you know, it won't cost anything. I have to stay home with my own, and I don't know. I was just it was an everyday thing. I was just being an ordinary person, an ordinary dad, an ordinary neighbor.
Is there anything that others could have looked for that might have picked up on those cues that you were doing something that wasn't right, that you were up to, you know, That you're up to no good, so to speak?
Yeah, I think anybody that tries to spend a lot of alone time with a child might be up to something. I tried to spend a lot of time with kids for different reasons, but one of them was to gain trust, and one of them was to be that perfect person so I could fool other people in my life, or my neighbors, parents, my wife.
Did you worry about kids telling on you?
I did. I worried a lot about that, and it just made me work a lot harder at gaining their trust. Most of my victims, they didn't have love at home, and it was easy for me to show them love, and I don't know, they just, it was just easy for me to show them love, and I felt by showing them the love that they wouldn't tell on me, because they needed that love that they weren't getting elsewhere. So I was kind of confident they weren't going to say anything.
Did you trick them or bribe them?
Well, yeah, I tricked them and bribed them a lot. I played games with them when their parents wouldn't, or their brothers and sisters wouldn't, or I just do a lot of things with them.
Nice things.
Nice things, all nice things, and I bought them things if they had mentioned they needed something, or their parents said they couldn't have something, or.
Were there ways the things that you did to select your victims? You said most of your kids didn't have love at home. How did you figure that out? What did you look for?
Because I was around there a lot. They would get hollered at a lot, pushed aside, called names, just different things like that, which I thought was rude of parents to be doing that. But on the flip side of things, I was using that as my advantage. Most of my grooming and gaining trust was done inside my home, or inside my neighbor's home sometimes. And naturally, when the parents weren't around, some of the parents of the victims, in my opinion, I thought, well, gee, he's taking care of them. Why do I can go about my business. I don't, he's doing a real good job. And they didn't much care, I don't think. I really don't think they...
And they thought that about you, that you were taking care of their kids?
Yeah. Why should we? I mean, these were the type of parents they were, and it was sort of the type of parents I was looking for.
There's a lot around like that.
And there are a lot around like that. So just about anybody can be open to that.
Do you think if a teacher or some other adult had watched you, had paid attention to how you were interacting with particular kids, would they have picked up on something bad going on?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I was pretty good at fooling people. As sad as that is, I was real good at fooling people. One of my victims was my daughter, and I had fooled not only my daughter. I tricked my daughter into a lot of things, but I had fooled my wife and tricked my wife. Found ways to get her out of the house, and wanted to babysit and things like that, just so I could be alone with my own daughter. I was a victim of sexual abuse myself, and just through things happening throughout my life, I figured it was just a part of life, and it was okay, although it hurt, but it was okay in some way. It was okay.
That's often hard for people to understand, that somebody who has a child who's sexually abused could turn around as an adult and sexually abuse others. Can you help us understand that?
From me, I think I was looking for answers as to why anybody would have wanted to do that. At the time, I was too ashamed to go and seek help and looking for answers or asking for help, asking why anybody would want to do this. I guess it was easier to find out for myself, even though I was hurting somebody.
Did you get any answers?
Not until I got caught. Not until I got caught. It didn't seem, it didn't feel right sometimes. Other times it felt okay. I felt guilty an awful lot of what I was doing. Each time, I didn't know this then, but each time I guess I was looking for answers. And then I just got caught up in a really big web of deceit, and I wasn't finding the answers, and yet I was continuing to hurt my victims.
And your wife?
And my wife. I consider her one of my victims.
When you were a child and you were being sexually abused, do you remember what it felt like to be the victim?
Yeah, but I had mixed feelings. It hurt. I was wondering why it was happening to me. But at the same time, I felt loved. I was getting attention, which is something you didn't get too often in my house, I guess. There was just no show of affection there. There was anger and sex abuse. That's pretty much all we ever seen in our home.
So you understand why it's so hard for kids to tell
I do.
when it's happening to them. Can you think of ways to encourage? Do you think they should tell?
Absolutely. They really should tell. Sometimes an abuser may say, please don't tell anybody. You know, like I use it, well, you'll break up the family, you'll never see us again, or you'll never see me again, you'll never see your mom, your brothers, sisters, things like that. But to be honest with you, that was one of the best things that could have ever happened was my victim telling on me. I wholeheartedly am thankful that she had said something.
How could you help other kids to tell? What do you want them to understand?
It's all right to tell. They should tell, because it's never going to stop. An abuser will never stop on his own. He may tell you, well, this will be the last time. Even if it's the first time, he may tell you this will be the last time, but it will happen again and again and again until he's made to stop. I've learned a lot in the last 4 years, and one of the things that I've learned was there are people out there who care. There are people out here who don't want other people sexually abusing children, and there is help if you're man enough to reach out for it.
What keeps you from reoffending?
Now, well, a lot of people know of my situation, for one, and I have a couple of safe people, a safe person, my wife being one of them. She knows all about my crime, and I don't go around children. I especially don't hang around them alone, nor will I, and my wife will see to that. Have another safe person that's when my wife isn't around. When I first started going to mental health, it was after I got caught, and that was part of what I had to do was go to mental health. So they already knew what was going on with me. I didn't have to tell them anything. I had to go for a psychosexual evaluation, and they had all that paperwork.
After keeping such heavy secrets for so long to be told, now we're going to reward you for telling. Tell us your whole sexual history. Was that hard to do?
It was, yes and no. It was hard, but it was also a huge relief to finally be able to get a lot of this stuff off my chest. And a lot of it making me the person I was 4 years ago. And it helped turn me into the person I am today, 4 years later. I was carrying around some baggage, some heavy baggage. And I had to tell them things I didn't think I'd have to tell anybody. I was hoping never to tell anybody. And I read part of the evaluation later, I forget where or how. And as I'm reading this, I'm saying, oh my God, I said that. I told them this. I didn't think I'd ever tell anybody that. So I was relieved to get rid of it. It's easy to make up excuses for what you did. But that's all it is an excuse. Because reality, you did exactly what you wanted to do. You had a choice to make, and you made that choice.
So you're saying the therapist needs to be able to challenge the sex offender?
Be able
if they're
to challenge.
thinking, if they're distorted thinking?
Yes, sir. It's
can't just talk about your feelings. You
right.
need to be confronted.
What should they do? What has the good therapist done?
He challenged me, and I think that was a big part of my problem, was being challenged. I didn't like being challenged. But it turned out okay. I didn't mind being challenged after a while because the challenge was helping me. I didn't see it at first, but the challenge was helping me.
Why did you stick with it?
Well, it felt, I wanted my family back. For one, it was important for me to get my family back. But it also felt good to finally clear your conscience and get some understanding of what you've done in your life. Whether you were the victim or the perpetrator, it was important to get answers. It took 4 years I attended this group, Safer group, and that's where I got a lot of understanding. It's a group of guys that meet weekly, and it's good support because we know we're not, like I knew I wasn't the only one. Look, I'm sitting in here with 5 other guys that were also offenders, and I learned a lot from them, hearing their stories. I learned a lot from them, and I'm sure, and I hope they learned from me, hearing my stories. And once I was in that group, I knew I wasn't alone, and that I was still ashamed of what I did, and I had to admit this in front of this group of people, including 2 facilitators that were there. So that was still, I was still ashamed of that, but it helped me also. So it was finally good to start talking about it. And I got a lot of questions answered in this group.
Did you ever talk about what you'd say to your victim in the group? Or how?
Oh yes, we had to do this huge clarification letter, and it consists of what happened, how it happened, why it happened, and making it quite clear in that clarification letter that it was not their fault, that it was all the responsibility of me, being the adult.
Well, isn't it just saying, I'm sorry, it's not your fault?
No, it's saying a whole lot more than that. It's letting the victim know where you were, where you were at the time of the abuse, what led up to the abuse, and making sure they understand that nothing they said or did made you abuse them, that it was your way of thinking, and it's just it's a really long piece and a real important piece, I might add. I wouldn't have realized that.
Well, it made you think about aspects of this that you never would have?
Yes. Yes, I certainly learned some things from that clarification letter that I didn't think would be any use. Just talking about it, I mean, I wouldn't think it would have been any use, but learning, you have to learn yourself. You have to learn about yourself before you can give answers about what you did and why you did it. And I certainly learned a lot about myself.
Interesting, you keep talking about answers. You talked before about looking for answers before you were caught, and when you were a victim, when you were an abuser, that you were always looking for answers. And now when you're talking about the clarification, you're talking about giving some answers.
Exactly. That's exactly what you're doing. You're giving answers to a lot of questions that you might be asking.
Do you think the child might have a lot of questions too?
Yes, that's what I mean. The child might be asking, you know, well, why did you do it to me?
It's addressed to her?
It's addressed to her and for her. I think it would help her tremendously. She needs to know that it wasn't her fault. And I think she's carried sort of the same baggage I did, that it must have been something I did, or it's my fault, or at least it's a way to get some love.
Anything you would want to say if you're victim or victims see this tape or see this interview? Is there anything you'd like to say to them?
I'm sorry. It was not their fault. It was not their fault. All mine. I am responsible. Nothing they said or did made me do this. I did exactly what I wanted to do, exactly what I planned to do, in some way or another. They were not at fault in any way.